Wow. Hi, everybody. That is by far the most generic title of a talk I've ever seen. We should fix that. Yeah, all right, this is better. Unleashing video game technology in healthcare from the battlefield to space. I think it's a little bit more descriptive. We'll go with that. And this is a subset, a selection of a talk I gave at a NATO event recently, talking about the applications of video game technology in healthcare. Essentially, over the last 30 years, the video games industry has distilled the neurochemical recipe for driving learning and driving behavior change among any audience. What we've essentially done is gotten to the point where the video games industry is 3 decades ahead of the state of the art in healthcare. It's a massive gap. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. And when we close that gap, we're able to really accelerate the adoption curve of new techniques, of new skills in healthcare. And in your home countries, your local video games industry is that secret asset you didn't know you had when you want to drive healthcare innovation. And I know you're not talking to your local video games industry, so over the course of the next 15 minutes, we're going to fix that. A little bit about me. I've spent my career in the video games industry, companies like LucasArts and Microsoft making Star Wars games. They gave me a laser pointer. There's all this fog. Oh, guess it doesn't really give you the Star Wars effect I was looking for. My team at Microsoft, our job was to figure out how do we make video game characters and video games look real. This was the best looking video game we had in 1989. And what we've managed to do in the video games business is every 5 years, we just hold on to Moore's Law, and we're able to create characters that look an order of magnitude more realistic. So when I joined Microsoft in 2001, this was the best looking video game character we had. He looks human, but he still looks very computer generated. And our goal was to go from this to this. So today, for 50 euros, I can buy a copy of Call of Duty. I can have a dozen soldiers on screen at once. I can zoom into the eye of one of the characters. This is the level of detail that we can create a character in a modern video game with all sorts of systems to simulate, make that eye look more realistic. Now let's contrast this to the state of the art in medical training. Let's sit down in front of a $250,000 eye surgery simulator. It looks like it fell out of a gumball machine. For those of us that play video games, this is like 1995. And I think the bigger issue isn't just that that eye doesn't look realistic, it can't capture the rare unforeseen scenarios that you would actually encounter in surgery that you're gonna learn about on live human beings. And the second issue isn't just that it's not realistic, but when you think about where that $250,000 simulator lives, it's in a simulation center. Now in the United States, we have about 200 of these for the entire country. So that means 90% of practicing doctors have no access to this on an ongoing basis. Now we're very familiar with this model in the video games industry because we abandoned it 30 years ago. Nobody goes to the video arcade anymore. You have more compute power in your pocket than you had in all the training centers in the world in 1995. And so, I can't do live demos because we don't have a line to the stage, so we're just gonna do videos. So I run a company called Level X that makes video games for doctors. Video play, video play. Everything I'm showing you runs on a phone. So we have over 1 million medical professionals earning continuing education credit toward renewing their medical licenses by playing video games, where they cut, cauterize, inject, diagnose, treat a huge range of virtual patients. And all of this is available to them for free on their phones. Literally, like, you play these games on your phone. If you don't believe me, you can download them from the App Store. With totally realistic fluids and soft tissues, and it can capture all the unforeseen bleeds and rare scenarios and so forth. And in addition to being able to run the technology on the phone, thanks to cloud gaming technology, a trauma surgeon in London can hop on a Zoom call with a surgeon in Kiev, and you can actually literally do surgery collaboratively over Zoom or Microsoft Teams because we just simulate this in big data centers in the cloud. So this is an example of something we presented. This is also at the NATO conference. So all of this technology can, for example, be used in the battlefield. This is an example for extremely basic combat casualty care training that's in development. And here, this is literally like, the stories are terrible, but on the Ukrainian front lines, insufficiently trained medics, you literally are having soldiers lose life and limb simply because they don't know the basics of how to place a tourniquet. And so these are just examples of applying, we have the technology that can run on the phones they already have to be able to solve these problems. But essentially this technology can be applied in any therapeutic area, not just surgery, also clinical, from cardiology to dermatology to pulmonology. Now the technology is super cool, but it's important not to be distracted by the technology. Because like I said at the beginning, all of this is in the service of something more important, and that's what we call game design. Over the last 30 years, like I said, video game designers have figured out the neurochemical recipe for engaging audiences and driving behavior change. We have figured out how to hit the perfect balance of reward and frustration, challenge and skill, to literally maximize the release of neurochemicals in the brain to maximize learning. Example, Angry Birds. How many of you have played Angry Birds? Who hasn't played Angry Birds? Really? Laurence, you haven't played? All right, that's your homework. You play Angry Birds. All right, why is this game so addictive? I was literally on the flight from Chicago yesterday. People are still playing this video game 10 years after it came out. Why is that? I want you to think back to the first time you played Angry Birds. What happened? Angry Bird hops in the slingshot. You aimed at the Tower of Pigs. What happened the first time you played? You missed. And what happened then? The pigs laughed at you. Why? This made you frustrated. Second bird hops in, you aim a little better, you fire, but you still miss, and you get more frustrated. Third bird hops in, you aim better, you fire, and it's glorious. There's explosions and animations, and the pigs go flying, and the music changes. All of this was deliberately designed to trigger a dopamine release in your brain that physically reinforced those neural connections you used on that last successful fire. This is why 2 hours later, you're firing that bird between two narrow obstacles at 50 meters, and why 80 hours later, you're still playing the game. Now, we didn't invent this neuromechanic in the video games industry. It's existed in the mammalian neuron for tens of millions of years. This is how our ancestors learned how to throw a spear. Miss, 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 frustration, frustration, hit, dopamine. All right, what are the neural connections that we just used on that last successful throw? Let's make those thicker. We're gonna wanna use those again. So in video games, we use this to train your brain how to predict a mental model of parabolic flight, but it goes well beyond that. We can use these same learning principles to help doctors develop complex mental models for diagnosing disease. So this is a puzzle game around diagnosing rare disease, where we're not going to reward you for guessing the right answer. You have to order the right tests. You have to ask the right questions to not only figure out what your patient has, but to also eliminate the other differentials. When we think about managing a difficult patient over time, balancing multiple comorbidities or side effects of different treatments, that's a strategy game. When we think about managing a ventilator or managing type 1 diabetes, that's a rhythm game. PEEP, pressure, volume, insulin, glucose. A player can develop a mental model of these complex systems that she would otherwise only develop through practice on live human beings. Now, the surgery stuff is obvious, but as you can see, this all extends well beyond surgery. So all of these techniques that we've been using on 3 billion unwitting players are just as effective on training doctors. And I learned this by accident. So I would love to say that Level X was games for doctors or some grand idea I had, but no, this all happened by accident. So I've had this impactful career in the video games industry, which essentially has made me the disgrace of my family because I come from a long line of doctors. My grandfather was a famous doctor, both of my parents. I'm the idiot who didn't go to medical school. And to show you how bad it got, in 2006, I accepted a technical Emmy on behalf of my team at Microsoft for pushing the cutting edge of video game graphics. It's not the Emmy they show on TV, it's the technical Emmys, but it's the same statue. That's me, that's Jensen Huang. We're accepting our Emmys. I call home to be like, hey, Mom and Dad, big deal, like I'm accepting it. And my father is an anesthesiologist. He answers the phone, without skipping a beat. He goes, Sam, that's very nice. But in this family, we only recognize Nobel Prizes. He goes, you're not yet 30 years old, you can still go to medical school. This is the world that I come from. You can't make this stuff up. So a few years later, he gives up and he says, all right, Sam, you're too old to go to medical school. Put all this gaming nonsense to good use. Make me a game to train my colleagues to do a fiber optic intubation. It's a tricky procedure. We only do it on difficult patients. Even experienced anesthesiologists will struggle with this if they haven't done enough cases. He goes, I don't want to drag anyone to the training center. Sam, make me a game they can play on their phones. I'm busy running one of the biggest game studios in Hollywood, but sure, Dad, out of guilt, I sit down for 3 weekends. I throw together a terrible little game. I upload it to the App Store. I don't think about it again. 2 years later, my dad calls me. Hey, Sam, how many people downloaded it? I go, Dad, I don't know how many of your friends downloaded your fiber optic laryngoscopy video game, but if you want, I'll check for you. So I went and I looked on iTunes, and I discovered there were 100,000 doctors, nurses, and airway specialists who've been playing the game. Thank you. So I Google it to try to understand how the hell this happened, and I discover, unbeknownst to me, they've been doing efficacy studies at medical schools all over the world that showed this little game I made for my father was drastically improving physician performance. So like I said, I would love to say this was some fantastic idea, less than just make your kids feel guilty when they don't accomplish what you want them to. So yeah, that was the motivation for starting Level X. What if it wasn't just me? What if we took the top video game developers, designers, artists who worked on everything from Mortal Kombat to Diner Dash, team them up with hundreds of physician advisors across every major therapeutic area in medicine to capture the challenges of the practice of medicine using video games. So now we work with most of the top 40 life science and med device companies to accelerate adoption of their products. We work with major medical societies and also NASA, which in a minute and a half, we'll see if we have time to tell this story. So all of this technology also works in space. So we've been working through a multi-year grant from NASA. We've been adapting this technology to help astronauts deal with medical emergencies in space. Scenario, you're 9 months into the Mars mission. One of the astronauts grabs his chest in microgravity, rolls over unconscious. What do you do? It's going to be the flight surgeon. It's always the flight surgeon. You've seen movies. Okay, so what do you do? So first, you're in a resource-constrained environment. The closest MRI, the closest CT scanner is billions of miles away. The only way you can image the heart or see inside the body at all is with ultrasound, which, as we all know, leaves much to be desired. There's no precedent. Your heart actually physically changes shape in microgravity. It becomes more spherical. How do I know that what I'm looking at is normal for an astronaut who's been in space for 9 months or abnormal? The next problem is there's no experts. Today, on the ground in Houston, there's this radiologist, Dr. Soch Lagesson, who literally will they have an ultrasound rig on the International Space Station. Now, the astronauts don't know really how to use it, but he can direct them from Earth. So he can say, all right, give me 10 degrees to the left, push in, and he can look at it and he can get a sense of, he can help direct them. But if you're 9 months into the Mars mission, it can be literally 40 minutes for the speed of light to make the round trip. An ultrasound exam would take a day and a half. And so you can kind of see the analogy, some of the same challenges you have in resource-constrained environments here on Earth. So ultrasound is weird. Ultrasound plays by a different set of rules. Sound casts a shadow. You can actually see an echo. What we managed to do is trick the video game hardware, essentially, you can turn that down. We don't need it. To essentially allow astronauts to train on real patient data. And we can literally take an MRI scan that's done on Earth, and we can simulate what that will look like after 9 months in space, visualized under ultrasound, also using the mechanics of game design to create all sorts of cool puzzles to help train your brain how to understand what things look like under ultrasound. So they cut a minute out of the talk because apparently we're running late. So, oh yeah, we launched a video game on the SpaceX mission last month. But yeah, these same things are useful, obviously in resource-constrained environments, in the military. The Israelis are using point-of-care ultrasound with great success as they to basically quickly diagnose conditions in the field. And yeah, so anyway, to learn more about this, you can feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting about crazy things that are happening at the intersection of medicine, healthcare, and AI. And like I said, I'm happy to help you work with your local video game developers to figure out how you can use these kinds of technologies and neuroscience to advance the practice of medicine in your country. Thank you very much.